How's it going, everybody? I'm Evo of the Lineman Lounge, and today I'm going to be coming to you with an episode of a new short series I'm going to be doing here, looking at the 2024 NFL season, or particularly the offseason. So, as the 2023 season in the NFL wraps up, it's time for basically 30 of the NFL's teams and fan bases to start looking forward to their next season. With the majority of the league starting their de facto off seasons already, I figured it's a good opportunity for us to take a quick look and a concise look at every franchise in the NFL and where they're going to be at heading into the offseason. A lot of casual fans, myself included in years past, will say player X should go to team Y and just leave it at that, but they're not looking deeper into it. And we all know that things are way more complex than that. And so it starts with the information that I've done a lot of research on here, and I'm going to be delivering to you, the fans of the Lineman Lounge, so that way you don't have to do as much of the legwork. You can just get your one-stop shop here and get a brief look at each of these teams, knowing where they're going. I'm going to be going division by division, breaking down each team individually. And today we're going to be looking at teams from the AFC East. So starting off, I'm going to go ahead and take a look here at the Buffalo Bills. So Buffalo Bills had a pretty darn good year last year, right? They went 11-6, but they started off the season, with Super Bowl aspirations again. Once again, couldn't get over that hump in the playoffs, made it to the AFC Championship, got booted out by, no, not the AFC Championship, the division. But either way, got booted out by the Chiefs, and it just seems to be a reoccurring theme for the Bills here. They ranked, according to PFF, offensively as the 8th best offense in the league and the 8th best defense in the league. Both really positive things for this Bills team, but it seems like they just can't get over the hump, and they need a little bit of extra something. And it's really tough to put your finger on that. And I'm sure Bills fans have a lot of opinions. And if you have those opinions, please leave comments and let us know what you think that the Bills should do. That being said, we're in the offseason for the Bills, and changes are absolutely going to be happening. It's going to be really interesting to see how Brandon Beane figures out this roster. As of right now, the Bills are over the cap by $52.5 million in effective cap space, according to PFF. That's the second worst cap situation in the entire league. And having another loss in the playoffs means that typically you want to build your roster a little bit more to just put them over the hump. And it's going to be difficult for them to do that, especially through free agency with such a high cap hit. As of right now, there's a lot of pending free agents for this team and a lot of impactful ones. I'm not going to list out every free agent for each team, but for the Bills here, some of the important ones are safety Micah Hyde, defensive tackle Daquan Jones, edge rusher Leonard Floyd, defensive end Jordan Phillips, linebacker Tyler Matakevich, defensive end Poona Ford, cornerback Dane Jackson, safety Taylor Rapp, defensive end AJ Epineza, defensive end Shaq Lawson, and wide receiver Gabe Davis. When you're $52 million over the cap, you can't go around just re-signing your own people, let alone other pending free agents. So it's going to be a lot of difficult decisions, possibly some extensions and restructures that the team's going to have to do. But some of the guys that you're going to kind of want to look at on top of those free agents are Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious White, and Von Miller. So Von Miller injured this year, as was a lot of that Bills defense, but he's going to be probably a cap casualty. Von Miller, obviously was really good back in the day. Bill signed him a couple years ago, expecting to make a big impact, and he was already kind of on the downward decline. But they added him just to be another edge rusher, and they didn't really get a lot out of him this year because of injuries and just decline in play. So he's probably a guy that's going to end up getting cut. You also have Tre'Davious White, who's a very good cornerback, but again, injured a lot and a high cap hit. And then the last one there, Stephon Diggs, a guy who's near and dear to my heart as being a Minnesota Vikings fan. He makes a lot of money, and his production went down this year. And it really sucks for this team because you want to surround your quarterback, Josh Allen, with as many weapons as possible. And that's been one of the issues on the offense, is that he's had Stephon Diggs and some pretty good to above average tight end play. Gabe Davis took a step back this year, but they haven't had a lot of offensive weapons. They finally got a bit of a running game this year with Cook, but not a whole lot of offense there, especially in the passing game. And so a guy like Stefan Diggs, who perennially has been negative in social media and stuff like that, and it seems like he was kind of trying to work his way out, and now he's having diminishing returns. He's in his 30s with such a high cap hit. He's someone that could be traded or potentially outright released, and I don't see that happening. But maybe there's some sort of an extension that is able to work his cap number down to help get that cap space back in compliance before the league year starts. But something might happen with Stefan Diggs this offseason. Now, for what it's worth, he's been way more positive this year than he has been in previous years. He says that, he wants to be with his team, work on things, but that might be kind of, hey, back against the wall. I'm not performing as well as I should. I'm making a lot of money and I still want to make money. So I'm going to say the right things this time rather than being the youngster that is really hitting his prime and he's trying to, extract as much money from the league while he can, which I fully get. It's going to be a really interesting offseason for this Bills team to see how they navigate that cap situation. That being said, the team in general has needs at wide receiver, cornerback, defensive line, edge rusher, safety, and offensive tackle. They are going to have some draft capital in order to fill some of those slots with 9 total draft selections, and they do currently have the 28th overall pick. Putting them in the back half of the first round of the NFL draft, it starts to kind of limit some of the players because you start to see some second round caliber players work their way in. But for me, I think that the Bills are going to have a lot of opportunity, especially with that first pick, to take a multitude of different players that are going to fit their needs. If you keep Stefan Diggs, it does not mean that you don't need a receiver. I don't see any way that they're able to retain Gabe Davis with that cap number. And Gabe Davis isn't the guy that we saw 2 years ago in that Chiefs game that everyone basically said was better than the Super Bowl. Gabe Davis had a lot of drops this year, just didn't have the same production that he was having in previous years. And last year was kind of a down year as well. We expected him to blow up and it didn't happen. So I expect them to possibly move on from him. And that means that they still need another receiver in order to go out there and support Diggs. Yes, you have Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox at tight end, but you want other wide receivers that can go out there and extend the field. There's a ton of wide receivers in this draft and a ton of really interesting ones that will be there at the back end of the first round. There's also need for offensive line help, especially at tackle. And this is a great draft for offensive tackle. We're looking at upwards of 12 guys that are offensive tackles with first round grades. So in the first round and second round, you're going to be looking at some really, really good stud players out there. But as far as free agency, I don't expect the Bills to be very active. They have to get cap compliant, as the new league year starts. So that's going to be the really interesting part of seeing how they actually go about getting cap compliant. And then they're just going to have to rebuild through the draft. And unfortunately, I don't know if that 11-6 record is going to be sustainable if they're losing a lot of these guys, because a lot of those players that I mentioned that are pending free agents, they're on the defensive side of the ball. And that defense, they had to play a lot of backups and whatnot this year and took their lumps, especially in the playoffs due to injuries. Some of these guys are aging themselves out. Some of them are good players, role players, things like that. And it would be nice to be able to bring them back and see their roles continue. But I think they're going to have to go with a heavy youth movement, try to get an offensive weapon for Josh Allen out there at wide receiver, and then go real defense heavy throughout the draft and hopefully hit on a couple guys and develop a couple of their guys in-house this year in order to be as competitive as they have been. All right, moving on, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the New England Patriots. So the Patriots are in a really interesting spot as well. You're going to hear me say that a lot. It's a common theme for the NFL offseason. Patriots are no longer head coached by Bill Belichick. Gerard Mayo has taken over as the head coach of the New England Patriots. They just recently signed Alex Van Pelt to be their offensive coordinator, formerly of the Cleveland Browns. And the reason why they're tearing up shop there is because they were absolutely terrible this year. And they've been going downhill ever since Tom Brady left. The 2023 record for the Patriots was 4-13. Their offense ranked 29th in the league and defense ranked 17th. And that's pretty standard with the Bill Belichick led defense. The defense will always be at least average, if not a strong point for this team. But that offense was terrible. And I mean, a lot of it centered around Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi to an extent. Neither of them seem to be full time starting level NFL quarterbacks at this point. And other than that, they have no weapons on offense at all. So it is kind of a clean slate and a bit of a brilliant thing for the Patriots to bring Gerard Mayo in as their head coach, because if you bring in an outside head coach, someone like a Vrabel, they're going to be expected to immediately revitalize this team and get them back on track, just like Belichick had them running. And the reality of this team is that they almost need to strip it down to the studs, and it already almost is down to the studs. And bringing in someone like a Gerard Mayo, who is going to have some lower expectations from the get-go, it's going to give them that 2 to 3 year leash for a head coach in order to get this roster right and try to develop guys, draft well, and bring in some solid free agents. Good news for the Patriots. They are 57.3 million or have 57.3 million in effective cap space dollars. So they're going to be able to be active if they want to be in free agency. They absolutely should. Penny free agents, they have Hunter Henry at tight end, right tackle Trent Brown, wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, tight end Mike Gesicki, cornerback Jalen Mills, running back Zeke Elliott, kicker Nick Folk, safety Kyle Duggar, and linebacker Josh Uche as their big-time pending free agents. There's a couple of those guys for sure that I would look to bring back. But that's, again, kind of the beauty of this team being stripped down to the studs is if they want to bring those guys back at a reasonable number, they can. If they want to start over, they can start allocating that cap space elsewhere. And you're not paying a quarterback an exorbitant amount of money. So your quarterback situation isn't figured out. You're going to have a really good opportunity to figure that out in the draft this year. So you can focus on BPA throughout the rest of the draft and BPA in free agency as well. Like pretty much any position on this team could use an upgrade. So making smart decisions is going to be very important for that front office and for Gerard Mayo. Again, Patriots team needs quarterback is probably the biggest need because it's the most important position on the football field. They also need wide receiver, offensive tackle, cornerback, edge, defensive lineman, tight end, kind of you name it. Anything that you want to upgrade on this team, they can go for. They have 8 total picks in the draft, but the big one is the number 3 overall pick. And now looking a little bit at that number 3 pick, you're going to have your choice of one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft: Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. Now, Jaden Daniels is definitely not the normal type of quarterback that you would see in New England, but he's the most likely to be there at pick number 3. People are used to seeing Tom Brady and then followed by Mac Jones, which is more of your traditional pocket passer, nothing too flashy, game manager, system quarterback types, whereas Jaden Daniels is a true dual threat quarterback with a lot of explosive play capability. So it'll be interesting to see if the Patriot way kind of sticks there in New England with Gerard Mayo as the head coach, or if they want to go a new direction and kind of get more of a new flashy offense. If that's the case, then Gerard Mayo is, to me, a slam dunk type of pick for them. If someone like a Drake May were to fall to them as well, I think that he would be an absolutely good fit too. The real shocker would be is if they go somewhere other than quarterback, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. We also have a blue chip player, probably the best ranked player in this draft, and wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. If you want to add an offensive weapon, that's the way to go. Like Marvin Harrison is going to be a stud, and he's going to be a stud for a long time. It's very rare that you go into a draft saying this player is going to be elite, future potential Hall of Famer. And realistically, Marvin Harrison Jr. shows all the traits to be that guy. So it would be tough to pass on a blue chip player like that if they really want to build around the team by just picking BPA. That being said, I think the most reasonable thing is to take a quarterback at 3. Some people have talked about the Patriots potentially wanting to trade out of the spot or potentially trading out of the spot. I would love that for my Vikings, but I don't see that happening because at 3, you're either going to take a quarterback or you're going to take the best player available. If you trade back, the amount of draft capital that you're going to get could be pretty large, but that is the very long future look at things. You're going to want to get multiple first round picks and stuff like that to help build your roster in future years and take your lumps as they go, probably not having a locked in starting quarterback this year. Um, that will take you out of the Marvin Harrison market as well. And there's a lot of other good receivers that you go for later on in the draft. But if you're passing on Marvin Harrison, it's almost like, let's not look at wide receiver. Let's look at some of the more foundational pieces to rebuild this house. And that's through the trenches, where again, lots of really, really good offensive linemen available in this draft. All right. Next up, let's look at the New York Jets. So, Jets are an interesting one. They finished the year 7-10 after seeing their new shiny quarterback Aaron Rodgers play 4 plays. The hopes were super high for the Jets, and I still, thought that they had the potential to be the 3rd best team in the AFC East this year. And I believe they did end up being the 3rd best team in the AFC East this year. The thing is that it was without Aaron Rodgers, so we didn't really get to see the potential of what that team could be. Offensively, they ranked 32nd, last in the league according to PFF. But defensively, they ranked number 1 according to PFF, which I assumed that they would end up being top 5. I didn't know that they would be the 1st according to PFF. So you can agree or disagree with that metric. Now, looking at this team going into the next season, they've said we're going to run it back. Aaron Rodgers should be back. We should have our quarterback ready to go. We'll see. He's getting old. Experimental Achilles surgery. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But they still need some other pieces on offense. And I think having Zach Wilson out there for a majority of the year kind of showed that despite having a subpar quarterback out there, you still need some help, specifically in places like the offensive line. Either way, let's look at what they got for cap. So effective cap space, they are looking at a whopping $366,000 in effective cap space currently before making any sort of move. So obviously that has to change some. All right. Signing draft picks and things like that are kind of factored into the effective cap space, but they're going to need to make some moves. Free agents that they're going to be losing: defensive end Carl Lawson, left tackle Dwayne Brown, safety Jordan Whitehead, safety Chuck Clark, edge rusher Bryce Huff, who is going to be a big target for a lot of teams if the Jets let him leave this year as a pure pass rusher. Defensive end Solomon Thomas, center Connor McGovern, and right tackle Billy Turner. So Aaron Rodgers, that is going to kind of be the crux of a lot of their offseason. They are expecting him to be back, and it's going to be how much impact is he going to have on their financial decisions, their draft decisions, their free agent decisions. Since coming to the Jets, it seems like he has really had the team on the hook for whatever he wants. He's brought in his old offensive coordinator, a whole bunch of former players that he likes having around him. And maybe that isn't the best way to run a franchise. That's just my personal opinion, that it's probably not the right way to go. That being said, defensively, obviously this defense is really good. They're losing some players, but they're not just good starters. They have good depth players there as well. Offense is really where this team needs to focus. Offensive line is a huge need for them, in my opinion. They have some receivers there. They have some offensive weapons. They've got a good running back. But if you invested all this money in Aaron Rodgers, he's not going to be as mobile, assuming this Achilles is fully healed. He probably isn't going to be as mobile as he used to be. Not to mention he's just getting old. You need to protect him. And right now, you have 2 to 3 at least open offensive line positions, and you really need to build there. You have Elijah Vera Tucker, and he's a pretty damn good player with a lot of flexibility. He can play both tackle spots. He can play both guard spots. And I bet you he could figure out center if you really needed him to. That being said, he can't play all 5 spots at once. Good news for the Jets is they are picking number 10 in the draft. They have 6 total picks, but at number 10, they're in a sweet spot where they're probably going to be able to get one of the top 3 rated offensive tackles on the board if they want to. In addition to that, again, they're probably going to have to make some extensions or revisions to contracts in order to get a little bit more cap. They could go after some cheap options through free agency on that offensive line. And really, that's where I would be focusing, is trying to get that offensive line as healthy as possible to make that offense work. We've seen Aaron Rodgers with generally subpar receivers or average receivers have really good statistical seasons in Green Bay. He can do the same here, except for he's already got some pretty damn good options in Garrett Wilson and whatnot. So build that offensive line at pick 10. You're going to have a bunch of really good options. Otherwise, they could look to add some weapons. Brock Bowers, tight end, and it's tough for me to call him a tight end, could be available there at pick 10. I say it's tough for me to call him a tight end because he's an enigma. He's technically a tight end, but he is Kyle Pitts, but way better, and going to a team that hopefully will use him better than the Atlanta Falcons. And a really good blocker, but an insane receiver as well. You can split him out wide. You can keep him in line. You're going to get some blocking help from him, but realistically, if you're blocking for a pass down, you don't want him there blocking. You want him out on a receiving route. They could also look at some wide receiver help as well, because again, this draft is just absolutely stacked with wide receivers. So if the Jets want to, they can make some aggressive moves, get a little more cap space, try to bolster up that line some, and go after offensive needs. Otherwise, as far as weapons, through the draft. Either way, we'll see if year 2 of Aaron Rodgers in New York works out for them, and if he's able to stay healthy. If he's able to stay healthy, that 7-10 record should absolutely improve. We'll be able to improve and catch up to the likes of the Bills or the next team, the Dolphins, that we're about to go over. We'll see. All right. And with that, last team that we're going to go over here is the Miami Dolphins. All right. Dolphins, hot offense, especially to start off this year. 11-6 record, the number 3 ranked offense, and the number 4 ranked defense, according to PFF. Defensive rankings were a little bit surprising to me because they definitely petered off towards the end of the year. They had a lot of injuries, specifically at edge rusher and on defensive line. But offensively, I mean, they put up 70-something points on the Denver Broncos this year. And that probably propelled them higher in these offensive rankings than they really realistically should have been. This is a team that a lot of people are kind of saying are fake with their record because they were beaten up on really bad teams. And when they played good teams, it would not look as pretty there. But I think that they're definitely trending in the right direction as far as their record and how this team is built. Good news for Miami this year. They don't have to forfeit their first round pick. They do have a forfeited pick this year, though, however, and that's a win. And other than that, Miami, they have a lot of bad news otherwise. So they also are in cap hell. They are 58.8 million over the cap as it currently stands, with effective cap space. In addition to that, they are losing some pretty important players as far as free agents. Also, outside linebacker Jerome Baker, center Connor Williams, defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, who's been a stalwart for them for years, wide receiver Braxton Berrios, linebacker Andrew Van Ginkel, tackle Isaiah Wynn, guard Robert Hunt, cornerback Eli Apple, which is whatever, and defensive tackle Raekwon Davis. Those guys are, especially the defensive players, are all pretty much primary starters. I mean, again, Christian Wilkins has been on this team and been amazing ever since he was drafted by them. Jerome Baker has been a super solid outside linebacker for him. And then you look at those offensive linemen, your center, a tackle, and a guard, all going away. And with Tua, thank God he didn't get a concussion and die this year. But you need some offensive line help there for sure. And that's really where the team needs to focus around. Offensive tackle, interior offensive line, and then you're probably looking at edge defender, defensive line, and cornerback. Potentially tight end as well. But really, this team needs to focus a lot on the offensive line. They need to prove going into next year that they aren't a team that just beats up on the bad teams in the league, that they can actually compete with the good teams in the league. And especially the good teams within their own division. It's just going to be extremely tough to do when you are 58.8 million over the cap. Now, again, they're going to have some opportunities for restructures and extensions that is going to be able to bring them a lot closer to where they need to be cap compliant. But I wouldn't expect them to be overly active in free agency. It's just going to be through the draft that they're going to need to build. They have pick 21 and 6 total picks. At pick 21, again, tons of offensive linemen out there for them to be able to get in the first round. Guys that are easy plug and play day one starters. And you don't have to just pick a tackle. Like some of these guys have good versatility as tackles or guards, and it's kind of an open book for you. You can pick anyone along that offensive line, and you're going to get good help. They've got a lot of weapons on offense there for Miami, and so if they're able to get that line looking good, they should be able to be at least offensively competitive going into the next season. Defensively, they might take a step back. It's going to be really tough to see how they start off the year with both of their starting edge rushers having major injuries. I don't think either of them will be available week one. Maybe one will, but we'll see. It's just a tough spot for them on defense, but they're really going to have to ride that offense going forward. And hey, based on how their head coach is running things, that's a big focus for them. So that's a quick look at the AFC East, looking at cap space, records, how the team fared throughout the season, and team needs that they're going to have going into the draft. Hopefully you liked this segment, and we're going to continue going forward with it. So keep an eye out. Let me know how you think I did. If you're a fan of any of these teams, give us your thoughts, put it in the comments, and we'll see you each and every weekend on the Lineman Lounge. Me and Mike will be going over a lot of stuff this offseason, more in depth with specific teams of things that we think that they need to do, and a lot of deep dives into the draft as that rolls around.